Good afternoon and welcome to the News Roundup for Tuesday, November 11, 2025. I'm Bill Thomas, and here's what's happening right now. President Trump issuing a dire warning to the Supreme Court concerning the staggering cost to our nation if the High Court decides to unravel his innovative tariff policy. Also, the president making a remarkable claim that the end of our government shutdown spells enormous trouble for Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. And China now picking a fight with their neighbor, Japan, after the island nation's leader vows to use all of their military might to defend Taiwan from the communist regime. Also, the Big Apple's recent election of a socialist mayor prompts the moneyed-up class to bust out of town and head for the Sunshine State. And 47 has found yet another way to profit from his charming personality. And if you're a collector, we'll let you know where you may be lucky enough to get your hands on a bottle of Trump brand libations. All this and much more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin here. President Trump now intensely urging our nation's highest court to issue a critical decision in favor of his groundbreaking tariff policy and warning that if they don't, there will be dire consequences for our entire country. It feels kind of good to have a president who's watching out for the country instead of giving away the store. The president now claiming that if the Supreme Court rules against him and orders his administration to undo all of the work they've already done, it's going to wind up costing our nation more than $3 trillion in refunds and lost potential. Goes on to argue that it will be nearly impossible for the U.S. to rebound from that kind of financial beating, and that ultimately the entire situation would result in a devastating and potentially insurmountable threat to our national security. Now, to refresh your memory, ever since he introduced them, Trump has been championing his tariffs as a way for our country to protect our nationwide interests and reconfigure a number of unfair global trade arrangements. Check it out. Yeah, the fix is in, and it appears to be working. However, a group of small businesses, as always a however, a group of small businesses and American states, they argue that the president has overstepped his authority by imposing those charges. They've taken their case all the way to the Supreme Court and now awaiting the High Court's decision. So far, every lower court has considered the case, has ruled against the Trump administration. However, they've all left the tariffs in place until the Supreme Court weighs in. Trump says that, in his opinion, the whole affair utterly ridiculous. And as he points out, other countries hit our nation with tariffs all the time. Also says that because of the tariffs, we're bringing in trillions of dollars, that it won't be long before we're able to start paying off our country's enormous $38 trillion debt. And that right now, a whole bunch of highly successful businesses, they're pouring into the U.S. and simply because of his policies. Final thought, this is the News Roundup Lowdown. For far too long, a number of other countries all over the planet appear to have the advantage over us with regard to trade deals. They made a ton of dough off the USA, and oftentimes we ended up getting kind of shortchanged. Finally, the Trump administration is fixing those deals, ensuring that we don't keep getting sucker punched in every round of the trade fight. And it's finally beginning to feel like we're no longer taking a deep dive on a sinking ship. The math might be questionable, and who really knows if tariffs are really generating trillions of dollars for the U.S., as the president claims. However, at the end of the day, hopefully the numbers, they all add up. And for now, I think we owe the president one last chance to kind of put this all together. In my mind, I think it's coming together real quickly. Bottom line is that the Trump administration is fighting for the safety and the security of our country, our economic health as well, and not a single one of us will ever object to what they're talking about right now. And you've heard about it, that $2,000 tariff income bonus. And they've been talking about it quite a bit in the past several days. Also, if tariffs are generating so much income for our country that we're finally able to pay down some of that national debt, that would be absolutely monumental. Now tell us what you're thinking. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com, and over to producer Davey, who's here to share some wisdom with us. What's cooking, Davey? And who do we go to first?
Okay, Bill, here's some wisdom from Waldo in Nashville, Tennessee.
Hello, Waldo. What do you think?
He says the American people chose the president to decide what's best for our country. If he wants to, he should be able to impose tariffs on any country he chooses.
And he chooses quite a number of countries to impose those tariffs on. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better myself. Stopping the president from squaring away these trade deals and lobbying the Supreme Court to hamstring his tariff policies that would surely drive us deeper into debt and compromise the very future of the greatest nation in the history of the planet. Don't be dragging us down. All right, we'll stick with the president for just a bit longer now and shift our focus to his resounding belief that Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer made a dreadful mistake by pushing Democrats too far and causing the longest government shutdown in our nation's history. Good job, Chuck. The president says that Schumer mistakenly thought he'd be able to hold out long enough to break the Republican spirit, but that in reality, the opposite happened, and the Republicans actually wound up breaking him. In the meantime, a growing number of Democrats now calling for the 74-year-old Schumer to pass the baton, step aside as leader of their party, and Trump says he actually feels kind of bad for Schumer. And I say don't feel too bad for him. There's still plenty of shuffleboard that needs to be played over at the Senior Center. He also goes on to say that he's known Schumer for a long time, that he's never seen a politician change so much in his life, and that the senator from New York used to be a pretty talented guy who's clearly lost his abilities. Even though a handful of Democrats broke ranks and voted with the GOP to finally bring the shutdown to an end, a large number of Democrats opposed their efforts as they continue to press for government-funded healthcare-related tax credits. However, Trump claims the Democrats have actually been holding out for $1.5 trillion in order to provide free health care to tens of thousands of illegal immigrants, many of whom he says are criminals, drug dealers, and even murderers. The president goes on to say that after weeks of this useless shutdown, the Affordable Care Act, they call that Obamacare, it's still horrible, that premiums have been skyrocketing for years, yeah, they have, and that moving forward, he'd like to see the American people have the choice to negotiate their own health insurance deals. Well, they do. You can buy Kaiser, you can buy Anthem, you can buy Blue Cross. You don't only have to buy Obamacare. Now, final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. The Democrat shutdown, which might as well be called the Schumer shutdown, it's turned into an embarrassing economic disaster. By now, you know the story. Tons of government employees are out of work, families deprived of SNAP food benefits. Air travel has become brutally complicated with flight delays, cancellations, unpaid air traffic controllers, and a bunch more. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And all this chaos, it's a direct result of Democrats, led by Chuck Schumer, demanding, among other things, the renewal of tax credits for Obamacare health coverage. He couldn't get what he wanted, so he wouldn't sign off on a spending bill to keep the government open. And now everyone has suffered as a result of him being stubborn and short-sighted. As a U.S. Senator, Chuck Schumer is charged with serving his constituents and the whole country. And for the past several weeks, he's served nothing more than his ego, and even his own party has thrown him under the bus. It's interesting to hear President Trump say that Schumer thought he could break the Republicans, and the Republicans broke him. That's what the president says, and that's not exactly accurate. And actually, it was some clear-thinking Democrats who, acting in the best interest of the country, they came to their senses. They voted with Republicans, and now we can get to the business of getting our country back on track. The shutdown is all but officially over and done with. And how are you impacted? Share your thoughts with us. And we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, who's checking in?
Okay, Bill, we have Lucas checking in with us from San Jose, California.
Hiya, Luke.
He says, you can blame Schumer all you want, but he's not the problem. The problem is all the cowardly, middle-of-the-road Democrats who caved in to the Republican bullies.
Oh, they're not cowardly. These are great American heroes. These are patriots. These are Democrats who saw the country was being dragged down by Chuck Schumer and his pals, people like Hakeem Jeffries. They stood up and voted for the right thing to bring the country back together and get the government up and running once again. Look, political agendas and personal ego should under no circumstances ever lead to a government shutdown. Yet in one way or another, as Americans, each and every one of us has been impacted by something which never should have happened in the first place. They are not cowards. They are heroes. All right, change things up just a bit now and turn our sights to a developing story which could have a ripple effect for our nation's armed forces as well as for the militaries of our allies throughout the entire Pacific region. Japan now embroiled in a rapidly escalating dispute with China following Tokyo's pledge to potentially stand up for their neighbor Taiwan if the island nation was ever invaded. Taiwan, we've got your back, and so does Japan. The Chinese communist regime throwing a fit and reacting angrily after Japan's prime minister revealed that an attack on Taiwan could conceivably trigger her country to rapidly deploy their defense forces. She says that if such an attack ever occurs, Japan would consider it a worst-case scenario as well as an existential threat to her nation. And she also says that if such an emergency involves Chinese warships and military forces, she'd have no choice but to consider it a serious challenge, a challenge to Japan's actual survival, and should exercise their right to collective self-defense by, standing side by side with their allies. Meanwhile, the Chinese Communist regime has still not ruled out the use of military force to take back the self-governing nation of Taiwan, which they consider to be a renegade province and part of their overall territory. It ain't yours. Calm down. Be quiet. Go away.
Don't touch it. Don't even look at it. Go on. Get out.
In typical classless form, they responded to Japan's dignified pledge to stand with their ally by trashing the Japanese prime minister, threatening her with violence, and trying to provoke her even further by questioning whether she's ready to take them on. Well, she is ready, and she volunteered to be her bodyguard, so take that, China. Now, for his part, the U.S. ambassador to Japan says that the Communist China's inflammatory comments reveal their true character, that their remarks are a clear threat aimed directly at Japan's prime minister, and that they amount to an attack on the Japanese people as well. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. China does a great job with a number of things, including but never limited to cybercrime, human rights abuses, and because they're an atheist state, they're also big on religious repression. China's also an expert in creating enemies, and they are right now on less than good terms, as you can see, with one of their neighbors in the region, our pals in Japan. As everybody knows, China is on even worse terms with Taiwan, and the CCP has been abundantly candid about their plans to take Taiwan by all means necessary, which has a number of Taiwan's global supporters highly concerned. Japan's prime minister vowing to assist in defending an ally is noble. It's noteworthy as well, but it's in nobody's interest right now today to begin discussing war. Japan is a force to be reckoned with. They're our ally, but by all accounts, China has a superior military complex. And in my estimation, right now, Japan should do all they can to promote diplomacy and refrain from making any threats. You may see things differently, and we're all ears. Tell us what you're thinking. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to you, and who checks in?
Okay, Bill, it's Fred from West Palm Beach, Florida.
Hello, Froderick. Tell us what you're thinking.
He says, God bless Japan and all our Pacific allies. The free world needs to stick together to squash the growing menace that communist China poses to freedom-loving people everywhere.
Absolutely, and we are all sticking together. And whatever China's plans are, they're not going to move on Taiwan, by the way, as long as Donald Trump is in the White House. Also, provided Vice President J.D. Vance wins the next election, I have it on good authority, he will win. Also, highly unlikely that China will make any advances on Taiwan. Now, some additional headlines we are keeping a very close watch on here in the News Roundup newsroom. And first up, the longest government shutdown in our nation's history is right now inching closer to an end, with the Senate narrowly passing several spending bills, which will extend federal funding for a number of months. We're on the right path. That legislation now heading to the House of Representatives for final approval before eventually making its way to the president's desk later this week. Another victory for the Trump White House. Moving along, and more breaking news from Washington, the Supreme Court weighing in and extending an order to block full SNAP payments for another couple of days. The justices reaching their critical decision in anticipation of what looks like the end of the shutdown and the quick resumption of our nation's food aid programs. And sticking a bit longer in our nation's capital, the Department of Government Efficiency, I haven't heard from DOGE in a while, announcing, they're still hard at work, and they've just revealed they've recently trimmed even more fat by eliminating dozens of wasteful contracts, which could have eventually wound up costing our country $1.5 billion. Racing over to the world of business and a quick peek at a couple of stories making waves in finance, in trade, and more. And leading off, the recent election of New York City's upcoming socialist mayor, Zoran Mamdani, is paying enormous dividends more than 1,000 miles away, with realtors in Florida revealing that folks are bailing out of the Big Apple. They've already dropped more than $100 million on real estate in the Sunshine State as they look to get out of New York City before they get taxed to death. Charging along, Tesla looking to energize their slump in sales by introducing a brand new car rental program in the U.S. and the offer to step behind the wheel and try out one of their high-end rides, kicking off at just about $60 a day. So now you can buzz around town in a cool kid's car, and for the same rental fee, you can also grab a Toyota Camry. Producer Davey, what would you do?
Oh, Bill, I'd hop on one of those $75 a day Cybertrucks. That's what I'd do.
That's a heck of a ride. Stop by, pick me up, and we'll tool around town. And a bit of trouble in news for folks who like to use their credit cards. Shopping with your Visa and MasterCard can soon be a tad more expensive, and this following a recent settlement which allows merchants to charge additional fees depending on what type of card you use. Fortunately, that agreement still awaiting court approval. And oddly, a lot of places, they don't take cash anymore, and they force you to use plastic. And now they want to charge you more dough for using the credit card. It's kind of a scam. And a quick gander at the lighter side of news. Retail giant Target implementing a new store-wide policy which requires employees who are within 10 feet of their customers to appear friendly by smiling, making some eye contact, waving, and even using approachable body language. You know, I think I would actually be confused if an employee at Target or any store said hello and offered up any help at all. It's not like the old days. I'm kind of used to employees avoiding eye contact, refusing assistance on aisle 12, and staring me down like I'm crazy when I don't know how to use the self-checkout machines. It's all too overwhelming for me. Now, Producer Davey, I got a question for you.
Don't bother me now, Bill. I'm on a break.
That's what I get everywhere I go. I'm on a break. Don't bother me. And they just kind of scurry off. Customer service, it's a thing of the past. Our President Trump is continuing to cash in during his second term in the White House by offering people associated with the U.S. military the opportunity to get their hands on several different types of Trump-branded wine and cider. The coveted tax-free bottles recently hit the store shelves at a couple of Coast Guard exchanges in D.C. and Virginia before quickly selling out. Now, no word on whether or not they'll be restocking the Trump grape juice anytime soon. You know, the president's made it clear time and time again, he's no fan of alcohol. And if I recall correctly, he's more of a Diet Coke than a Bartles and James kind of guy. Strikes me as a bit odd for a teetotaler to be selling bottles of vino. Takes me back to the 1970s, and that's when President Carter's brother was hawking Billy beer. Now, Producer Davey, are you a Billy beer kind of guy, or are you more of a Fresca sort of gentleman?
No, Bill, I prefer one of them tall, delicious, frosty mugs of A&W root beer.
Oh, A&W root beer's got that frosty mug taste. Nothing better, unless you had some vanilla ice cream. A good old root beer float. And just in time for the holidays, an American legend returns. McDonald's announcing that by popular demand, their allegedly delicious McRib sandwich now available, once again. They say the barbecue treats are available for a limited time only, that they're only up for grabs in certain American cities, and that if you're a big fan, there's even a new online locator which can help you track one down. Or if you're Producer Davey, you can use that same online locator to track down two of them. Because McRibs, according to Davey, they're kind of like Lay's potato chips. I'll bet you can't eat just one. Now, I recall having a McRib once, and that was way back in the early 1980s. And in defense of the Golden Arches, I can say this. I'm almost over the trauma. Yeah, it's pretty bad. McDonald's traffics in burgers, fries, and shakes. They'll even sign off on their chicken nuggets, but I'm calling foul on the McPork thingy. Spongy, weird, piggy, soggy pickles, and raw onions. This has been a McRib editorial. If you'd like to respond to this editorial, speak up now. Davey, you had a rebuttal, yes?
Oh, absolutely, Bill. Here's an editorial rebuttal for you on behalf of millions of McDonald-loving Americans and people all over the world. The McRib sandwich is one of the most delicious things on the entire menu. Tangy, barbecue, sweet, spicy, the whole 9 yards, Bill. You're missing the boat. That's the end of the rebuttal.
You've just heard a News Roundup rebuttal. If you'd like to chime in, feel free, newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And now it's time for us to call it a wrap on the Tuesday edition of the Big News Roundup. Just hearing you talk about that McRib, I got a little aching in my belly right about here. And before we go, as we do each and every day here on the program, I'd like to share with you a very notable quote. And these inspiring words come to us today from a guy named Henry James, who said, "Three things in human life are important. The first is to be kind. The second is to be kind. And the third is to be kind." James was a highly respected American-British writer who is widely considered to be one of the greatest English-language novelists of all times. Among his best-known works, Washington Square and The Wings of the Dove, and all the rest. Plus, by the way, Davey, he and his partner, Mr. Bartles, I believe they were in the libations industry, right?
No, Bill, he had nothing to do with this guy. He had nothing to do with Bartles and James. He's simply one of the greatest writers of all time.
I did not know that. And now it is time for us to bust on out. But before we go, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. For example, simply subscribe to the program so you never miss even a single episode. And if it's not too much to ask, maybe you'd hit up a friend or two and ask them to subscribe to the channel as well. And now it looks like our time, it's officially up. So have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. As we always say, let's all continue to watch out for one another. And with that, we'll turn to Engineer Jamie and ask Jamie to dim the lights. We're going to fade to black, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.